Did I have you for Mass last week? No. I wonder where I was. I hope I was doing okay. All right, dearest family, last week I gave an assignment to the group that there was 12 o'clock Mass, and it had to do with the 10 Commandments. You have heard of those, right? There are full 10 Commandments. And if I use the word commandment, what does that indicate to you? Yeah, it's not a request. I would come up and say, John, would you follow the 10 Commandments? Jesus says, John, if you follow after me, you will do the 10 Commandments. Very different, very different. As we move through now, I'm going to focus on what the last sentence said in the gospel. He did what he said he would do. Now, at this time, the people who listened in the synagogues heard a lot of stuff about God. But when they heard it from those who proclaimed it, it didn't seem real. It seemed more theoretical. So, what does Jesus do as he comes into his time to do public work? Is that he purposely goes to the sick, the suffering, the dying, a deaf mute that is talked about in the gospel today. And there, rather than preach the word, he is the word. Do you understand the difference? Is this clear, what I'm talking about here? So when Jesus started out, he didn't start out just by telling people stuff. He was doing the word. From there, he began to be able to preach about the word. Why is this important? Remember, those of you who are my age, so those of you who are younger, just listen a little bit. As we went to school, you began to hear talk among the teachers that if I am going to teach properly, my children can't be hungry. Because if they're hungry, they do not have the physical ability to be able to listen clearly and well. Remember that problem? And it occurred at various times up until the time I was doing teaching myself in the 60s and 70s. What Jesus is pointing out in this gospel, how important it is before you begin to speak, is that you assess the persons in front of you about what is going on in their lives, to be aware of that. Because sometimes, if I went up to Mr. and Mrs. Schwab, and they said, and I asked them, what is their problem? And they'd say, we're hungry. And I simply say to them, be filled. Think about food. How helpful is that? I want you to think about a delicious hamburger. Some are getting hungry already here. We would consider that ridiculous, wouldn't we? And this is what Jesus is pointing out. We cannot, as Christian Catholics, just speak words. We have to be the words. And do you know what this shows? That Jesus started out in a compassionate way. And compassionate way means he meets people where they are. He never expects them to be in a place that they are not. Does that make sense to you? So as you and I share this word of God with others, it is important that we assess what's going on. No one wants to be told what to do. No one really likes that, because it's missing an important piece. And that piece is this: I do not know what's going on in the life of the other person. A simple principle that you learn in counseling is, when you ask people what their needs are, you do that and not presuppose it. You ask. If a person needs help, you say, what kind of help do you need? Now, if you leave here and you're going down the road and there's somebody with a flat tire, that's fairly clear. They have a flat tire. Little side note here. Do not come up and say to them, you have a flat tire. Old news, old news. They'll say, boy, this is a bright one. It's not, you have a flat tire, it's, how can I help you? And that's the same way that Jesus is pointing out to us, that we clearly go up to others and we say in different and kind ways, is there a way in which I can help you? Dearest family and friends, Jesus very purposely started his ministry with the sick, the suffering, the dying. And he's saying to us throughout all of our life, you and I are going to be called to assist those persons. And it is not by telling them stuff, it's by being the Word of God, showing that compassion, being there for them. And there are going to be situations, all of us have gone through this in one way or another, where a person has lost a loved one. We know that loved one is not going to return. So our job then is to simply be there for that person and stop the jibber-jabbering. That's what's not necessary. What is necessary is that you make an effort through compassion to be at one with them and make the Word of God come alive. And I can tell you this, when you do that, the person who is the receiver of that kind of love, care, and concern will never, ever forget it. And that's the power that Jesus shares with us, and the need for compassion. Lastly, you've heard me say this before. We are inundated from morning till night with information about everything. So people have a certain tiredness, a certain hearing tiredness about that. At our time, more than ever, it is important that we be that word among the people with whom we live. And you know how I tell you to do that, or share with you the way that's done? One loving act at a time. That's where the compassion comes from. That's where the Word of God begins to live and come alive and becomes real. So real that at times people will reach out to touch you. You will hold their hand, touch their shoulder, put your hand on their head, and that will be a source of healing, of comfort. And you're saying, this is confusing and upsetting, but I am here with you, and I'm not going to spoil the being here with you with a bunch of political prattle and piffle, because it's not helpful. But being there in a compassionate way, as Jesus did, being the Word, has a powerful healing effect. Now to this dear, wonderful couple. Now it's 70 years. I always tell people what my dad said. He and my mother lived together for 73 and a half years. And people would say, my dad's name was Walter. I'd say, Walter, how did you do this? He said, well, as my hearing got poor, my relationship got better. The second thing you would say is that she can outrun me, so I know I had to behave. But putting the kidding aside, the church today thanks you for your wonderful gift, for this wonderful family that is here, that you made your commitment and you kept to it. And we know that that was never easy. And from where you started, you knew from the beginning it was not going to be easy. But I tell you this, even at this 70 years, there are 3 important sentences that you practiced in order to get here, and you did it in different ways, and I'm going to share that with him. You don't think I know that, do you? I was watching. And it's this. There are 3 important sentences. These can never, ever be presumed. The first one is, I love you. And to mean it. And spouses know whether this is piffle or real. Do you know what piffle is? It's like BS. Okay, that's piffle. The next thing is, I'm sorry. Because I realize that sometimes I'm not what I could be or should be. And the third one is, I forgive you. I love you, I'm sorry, I forgive you. That's what it takes to get to 70-some years. And the more you are able to say it, the clearer that becomes, the stronger the union. Now, all the guys just relax. The dear women who are here, just zone out for a moment. And I got to tell you one other secret. This is the 4th one. And the sentence is, yes, honey. That's the other secret. You will be surprised at the gift that comes from that, yes, honey. To skip that, you'll see what wrath can come. Seriously, Mr. and Mrs. Schwab, the church thanks you for your witness, for the gift of who you are, because we still have church. Your message